मृदंग वाद्य शूनिते माना अबसर सदा जाचे गौरविहित कीर्तन शुनि आनंदे हृदय नाचे जुगल मूर्ति देखिया मोरा परम आनंद होया प्रसाद सेवा कोरिते होया सकल प्रापंच जाया जे दीन गृहे भजन देखी गृहे ते गोलोक भाया चरण सिंधु देखिया गंगा सुख न सीमा पाया तुलसी देखी जुराय प्राण माधव तो शनि जानी गौर प्रिया शाख सेवानी जीवन सार्थक मानी भक्ति विनोद कृष्ण भजने अनुकूल पाय जाहा प्रति दिवसे परम सुखे स्वीकार करो ये ताहा Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. We'll read the translation. Dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to the devotional service, while the service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creeper of divine love. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami, for they are the mother of devotion. As my dwelling place, I choose the greatest of reverence and love, the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna. All those places where my Lord Gaurachandra travelled for the pastimes, I will visit in the company of loving devotees. My mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of kirtan ordained by Lord Gaurachandra, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's prasad, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Golok Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and the service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is the river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord, my happiness knows no bounds. The sight of holy Tulsi tree soothes my soul, and I know she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring Shak, a green leafy vegetable preparation, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Whatever Bhakti Vinod obtains that is conducive to the service of Sri Krishna, he accepts every day with greatest joy. श्रील भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जना वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन जमुना तीरा वनचारी जमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमती डिवाइन ग्रेस एसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमती डिवाइन ग्रेस भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की एकादशी व्रत की ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल डिवोटीज ऑल ग्लोरीज टू असेंबल डिवोटीज ऑल ग्लोरीज टू श्री गुरु एंड गौरांगा ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasa Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam by Satsvarup Das Goswami Maharaj. And on last Ekadashi, also we continued reading from wherever we had left. So last Ekadashi we saw that Prabhupada traveled from New York to Atlanta. And after landing in Atlanta, at the Atlanta airport, he had interaction with few disciples and devotees. And now today we will continue reading from there. After that, it's Gainesville, July 29, 1971. So after landing in Atlanta, Prabhupada is taking a drive to Gainesville, which is around 65 miles. So Srila Prabhupada asked how fast the car was going and how long it would take them to get to Gainesville. 65 miles per hour, the driver said, and it would take 1.5 hours. So in America, generally in India, we calculate distance in kilometers. In America, they use miles, at least at those times. I don't know now what they do. But generally, their regular terminology is miles. So here 65 miles means approximately 100 kilometers. And the drive will be a 1.5 hour drive. So Prabhupada observed the scenery along the highway, pine forest, marshes, exotic birds, and occasional armadillo frogging near the highway. Lotuses and lilies grew wild in the canals along the roadside, and the bright sunshine warmed the clear air. Gainesville was a side trip for Prabhupada, a special day of preaching. He had left Shyam Sundar, his secretary in New York, and brought with him only Arvind, his servant. He had come for a day to bring the mercy of Lord Chaitanya to yet another city. When the devotees had picked him up at the airport, he had appeared grave. But on catching sight of the devotees, he had smiled wonderfully, and then, turning to Hridayananda, he had asked, which way? He was like a transcendental fighter asking to be pointed towards the battle. So probably Prabhupada is coming to Gainesville for the first time, and Atlanta is also at that time, 1971, was not a grown-up temple. Only some 10-15 devotees had come together and made a rented house into a temple there in Atlanta. Prabhupada walked along a flower-sprinkled pathway and into the temple, a rented house near University of Florida campus. In the temple room, he stood a moment studying the crude but sincerely executed painting of Lord Chaitanya and his associate. Hridayananda asked Prabhupada if he would like to rest, and he nodded. While the devotees performed kirtan, Prabhupada retired to his room, returning later to sit on a large blue velvet Vyasasan in the small temple room. In addition to Prabhupada's disciples from Gainesville, Miami, Tallahassee, and New Orleans, many university students and other guests were also present. It is so nice to see so many young boys and girls here, Srila Prabhupada began, in the remote corner of the world, so far away from the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. So generally people think that America is the center of the world. At least Americans think like that. So for the Americans, if you say that you are very far from the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, they feel little differently. We are the center of the world. And how can you say that you are very far? But we can see that for Prabhupada, Mayapur was always center. He is telling they are very far from birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada lectured about saving grace of chanting the holy name of the Lord. One of his disciples, he said, had been present when his mother was dying. Because he had been telling about Krishna and Hare Krishna, she said to her son in the last words, Where is your Krishna? Is he here now? And then she died. For uttering the holy name and thinking of Krishna, Prabhupada said she would go to the spiritual world. After Prabhupada finished his talk, a girl reporter from the university newspaper raised her hand. I see almost all young people here, she said. Why is that? Prabhupada replied with a question. Why are there so many young people in the university? The girl reflected a moment. Well, I guess that's the age for education. Yes, Prabhupada said. So this is the age for Krishna consciousness. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. So we can see how Prabhupada very emphatically told that young people, this Krishna conscious education is for young people. Even Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Arjuna was not an old man. He was a very fighter, Kshatriya. So many people in this world have this misconception that Krishna consciousness is for old people. Even when I came to Krishna consciousness, relatives, neighbors, families, they have objection. You are planning to do Krishna consciousness, you do it when you become old. Now you should earn hard and earn money, work hard and earn money. So that is not right as per Krishna consciousness. The young age is for Krishna consciousness. We see that Prahlad Maharaj says that from Kaumaram means from the age of 5. And most of us probably would have been late more than 20 years by that calculation. The engagement for which Prabhupada had come and for which the University of Florida was paying $1,000 was to be that afternoon on the campus at the Plaza of Americans. When Prabhupada arrived, several hundred students were gathered near the temporary stage, sitting casually on the grass, lying beneath the fragrant Mongolia trees. The sky was overcast and rain threatened. As more students gathered, the crowd grew to 500. Then just as Prabhupada was about to speak, a little drizzle began to fall, and Hridayananda came on stage to hold an umbrella over Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada sitting on his Vyasasan and softly into the microphone, someone is smoking, and the students politely extinguished their cigarettes. No sooner did Prabhupada begin his lecture, however, a dog started yapping. Prabhupada paused. Who is that dog? He asked. When the dog persisted, Srila Prabhupada said, he also wants to talk. Finally, the barking stopped, and so did the rain. But Hridayananda continued to hold the umbrella over Prabhupada's head. While riding in the car back to the temple, Prabhupada asked to hear the tape recording of his lecture. When he heard the dog barking at the beginning of his talk, he laughed. Prabhupada, Hridayananda said, your lecture was wonderful. Everyone liked it. The students liked it. The devotees liked it. The professors liked it. All right, Prabhupada said, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's day of preaching was not over yet. Next was an evening television interview. The interviewer had done some preparatory reading and he introduced Srila Prabhupada by first describing who Krishna was according to Vedic literature and how Srila Prabhupada was in the disciplic succession from Lord Chaitanya. When the interviewer asked Prabhupada for an introductory statement, Prabhupada explained, the Krishna consciousness movement is trying to invoke in all the people the original consciousness that we are part and parcel of Krishna. When the interviewer asked Prabhupada, who is your spiritual master? Prabhupada lowered his head humbly and stated the full name of his Guru Maharaj, Vishnupad Paramhams Parivrajagacharya Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada. The interviewer, however, seemed bent on controversy. In what way, sir, may I ask, do you think right now that the teachings of love of God that you are preaching is different and perhaps better than the teachings of love of God that were being conducted in this country and have been conducted in the rest of the world for centuries. Srila Prabhupada, this teaching is the most authorized. That is the fact. We are following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. He is accepted by us, according to the authority of Vedic religion, to be personally Krishna himself. For example, you are an expert in this establishment. If someone is doing something under your guidance, and if you personally teach him, do like this, that is very authorized. So when Lord Chaitanya taught God consciousness, God himself was teaching. Prabhupada had answered positively, avoiding the sectarian dispute the interviewer had invited. Yet repeatedly the interviewer tried to invoke him into controversy. He seemed to want Prabhupada to appear arrogant, sectarian, and anti-American. Prabhupada, however, insisted that he was not opposed to any other religion and that anyone in the world could chant the name of God as it appeared in his religion. Interviewer, but there must have been an element of dissatisfaction on your part with the way Godhead was being professed in the part of world before you came. Otherwise, there would be no sense in you being here. So here we see that an interview is trying to intrigue Prabhupada into arguments. This is not just first time. Many times Prabhupada, this is 71, so almost last 4-5 years, Prabhupada had many interviewers who would ask some questions and try to invite arguments, sometimes unnecessary arguments. So Prabhupada is trying to evade that. Prabhupada is telling any type of religion you follow, but if you follow sincerely, you will attain perfection guaranteed by that religion. So sometimes when we preach, people say that why do you think only Krishna consciousness or Iskcon is the only way? Why I cannot achieve perfection by practicing Christianity, or why I cannot achieve perfection by practicing Islam? So sometimes we should say that if you are practicing your religion sincerely, you will achieve the destination whatever your religion has guaranteed. We don't have to say that that is the highest perfection, or rather you need not argue that your religion is different from my religion. So sometimes some people argue just for the sake of argument. If somebody is really sincere, they will understand that Lord Chaitanya's mercy is extraordinary. Srila Prabhupada, it is not just this part of the world. Practically every part of the world has very little interest in God. They have more interest in dog. Prabhupada answers very strong and philosophically strong. The interviewer trying his professional best again attempted to find some fault. Interviewer, it seems to me, sir, as interpreted in your writings, that there is a very high emphasis placed on relationship between the individual and the God. Yes, that is found everywhere. Interviewer, yes, but you place more emphasis on that relationship than on the relationship between one individual and another. Am I right in that? We have to establish, first of all, our lost relationship with God. Then we can understand what is our relationship between one individual and another. If the central point is missing, then there is practically no relation. You are an American and another is an American, and both of you feel American nationality because the center is America. So unless you understand God, you cannot understand who am I, nor can I understand who you are. So people sometimes come with philanthropic ideas that service to humanity is better than service to God. And sometimes they mix up that philosophy with various modern ideas. But Prabhupada did not like such ideas. Unless we understand our true real identity. Jivera Swarup Hoye Krishnera Nityadas. So that is our first identity. And all other identities come later. That whether you belong to this nation, this caste, and so many other things. The true eternal relationship is that we are servant of God. So unless we know that relationship, all other relationships also lead to temporary relationships. Interviewer, I think that in this part of the world, in the Western world, we place a great deal of emphasis on religion in the ways it gets one man to deal with another man. The ethic of religion. Now in the Krishna conscious movement is going on. Prabhupada says, we are not concerned how one man deals with another man. Isn't that part of your Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada says, no, that is not important. Because we know as soon as one knows how to deal with God, he will automatically deal very nice with others. Interviewer, but let's take to Christian religion for an example. You know the 10 commandments. There is a heavy emphasis in the 10 commandments on relationship between one human being and another. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. You know that sort of thing. So in the 10 commandments in the Bible, it is also mentioned that you should treat the neighbor as yourself. Like that. So there is more emphasis on how we deal with one another, and there is little less emphasis on God. So Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, but I say that Jesus Christ never said and never meant that thou shalt not kill. Refers to only human beings. Where is that evidence? So Prabhupada got some scope now to discuss. He is talking about 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill any animal. Interviewer, any life. Srila Prabhupada, any life, that is religion. Interviewer, it has never been interpreted that way. Srila Prabhupada, you have interpreted it differently. He said, thou shalt not kill. He never said thou shalt not kill amongst human beings. Why do you interpret that way? Prabhupada had given the TV interviewer the very thing he was after, controversy. But because it was not desirable controversy, the interviewer promptly dropped it. Instead, he asked Prabhupada how one could recognize a true follower of Krishna consciousness by his behavior. He would be a perfect gentleman, Prabhupada said, that's all. Therefore, I prohibit my disciples to eat meat. Interviewer, to eat meat. Prabhupada, yes. And therefore, I prohibit illicit sex life. Therefore, I prohibit intoxication. They do not even smoke. What to speak of other intoxication? When Prabhupada said that whoever observed these 4 rules would become a perfect gentleman, the interviewer asked whether there was a place for women in the religion. Prabhupada replied that women and men have same rights and followed the same principle. The interviewer asked whether Prabhupada was encouraged or discouraged, and Prabhupada said that he was encouraged because so many devotees were joining. The interviewer doubted that many were joining, since out of 200 million Americans, only 24 devotees were present in the TV studio. So Prabhupada is telling, when you sell diamonds, Prabhupada replied, you cannot expect that everyone will purchase. After a final question, the interviewer asked if Prabhupada had any complaints about American society. Srila Prabhupada, I have no complaint. These boys and girls are very nice. I am rather encouraged that these boys and girls are hankering for something nice. They are frustrated, so now since they have been the best thing, they are coming. So this is a very revealing interaction with interviewer. So sometimes when we go out and preach also, some people just ask some various question. Sometimes in India, some people ask intriguing question. Why don't you worship other gods? What about this God? like that. In Western society, the challenges are little different. Especially when Prabhupada was preaching, it was a hippie culture that was getting lots of promotions. However, the interviewed asked Prabhupada and his followers to chant Hare Krishna, and within half a minute, they were off the air. The hot studio lights went out, and the engineers started talking among themselves. The interviewer bid Srila Prabhupada a polite farewell. He had no intention of continuing their talk, but Srila Prabhupada continued preaching. On camera or off camera made no difference to him. He saw the interviewer not merely as a television personality, but as someone to receive Krishna's mercy. So that is something very unique about Srila Prabhupada. He just continued preaching. We saw that morning he took flight from New York to Atlanta, probably 1.5 hour flight. And then in Atlanta airport, one meeting. And then he came straight to Gainesville. There he went to temple. There he gave lecture. Now he came to this interview, television interview. The television people is gone, but the people who are winding off the studio, he started preaching to them. So a true preacher continues preaching. We will see even as we go ahead till midnight. Prabhupada is still preaching. The two had been sitting very closely for the interview, and Prabhupada now leaned towards the interviewer and said, "Let me ask you one question. If you have some disease and you want to cure this disease, what is the best way to go about it? By asking a friend or by going to a medical doctor and asking how to cure this disease? Would you go to a friend?" The man replied, "Yes." Prabhupada shook his head. "You would go to a friend?" Again the man said yes. The interviewer was not concentrating, so Prabhupada patiently repeated his example. "Try to understand," he said. "If you have some disease, then would you go to a medical doctor or would you go to a friend?" The man could not grasp the point, so Prabhupada answered, "No, you would not go to a friend, you would go to a physician, one who knows the answer. That is spiritual master." They talked a while longer, and finally Prabhupada and the devotees left. It was almost midnight, and Prabhupada went to his room. When he first arrived in Gainesville, he had agreed to initiate the 5 eligible candidates and had even taken their japa beads. But now the day had passed. There had been no initiation, and Prabhupada still had 5 strands of beads. Joseph and Sam, who had come all the way from New Orleans, and David Lieberman and his wife, Andrini, and a Gainesville boy named Gary, were all in anxiety. They had stayed up, talking amongst themselves, wondering whether Prabhupada would hold an initiation ceremony in the morning before he had left. So this is just one day in Gainesville, and the next day Prabhupada was about to leave. So the people who had come expecting to be initiated, they are in anxiety whether the initiation will happen or not. The whole day went by, there was no initiations. So Arvinda, who is the secretary of Prabhupada, servant of Prabhupada, told them that there would be no time for a ceremony in the morning. So all devotees get dissatisfied, could not get initiated. But then he would ask Prabhupada when they could get their beads back. He went to Prabhupada's room, leaving the devotees to sit and talk about Srila Prabhupada. Then Arvinda returned. He surprised everyone by announcing, "Prabhupada is going to give your beads now. He is going to give your initiation in his room." Just imagine, generally the initiation takes place in the daytime. But Prabhupada's preaching is continuous. He has no time, but still he is continuing preaching even in the midnight. He is going to give you initiation in your room. The devotees excitedly hurried to Srila Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada sat on his bed. Imagine an acharya giving initiations by sitting on his bed. He wore no shirt, only his dhoti, which he had pushed up high on his thighs and tucked under himself, like a loin cloth or gamcha. His body was smooth and glowing. The devotee sat on the floor around his bed while he held their beads in the hand and chanted. Prabhupada handed Gary his beads. So your name is now Dharma Das. That means one who is strict follower of all religious principles. So we started the class little late, so we'll go maximum till 9:15 or 9:20. Dharma, I was actually very nervous and I was practically shaking because I was afraid I would do something wrong in front of Srila Prabhupada. I was so nervous, practically I couldn't even hear properly, but I was very happy to have been accepted by Srila Prabhupada. I knew, of course, that there was no question of ever leaving the movement now. I never wanted to leave anyway, but now this was official. Even if I had considered it before, now there was no question of it. Then there was a Joseph from New Orleans. What is his name? Prabhupada asked Arvind. Arvind read from a sheet, Bhagavad Das. Prabhupada smiled and said, Oh, Bhagavad Das, very good. There are two things. There is a book Bhagavad, Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and there is a person Bhagavad who follows perfectly those teachings. He is a living manifestation of book Bhagavad. And you are Bhagavad Das, that means you are servant of the book Bhagavad and the person Bhagavad. So Bhagavad, I always wanted a name that meant I was servant of the Guru. So when I heard this name, I was very happy. Prabhupada started to hand me my beads and then he pulled them back and asked, what are the four regulative principles? So I told him and he said, very good. So generally the ceremony of initiation is like that. The disciple comes to the spiritual master, takes his vows and speaks about these regulative principles and regulations of chanting and Ekadashi, and then the Guru gives the beads. But Prabhupada is just going in a very little casual way, and while giving the beads, is just holding, tell me four rules. Then he went to hand over my beads again, but he pulled them back. He asked, how many rounds do you chant? I was very proud because I had been chanting 20 rounds a day for about 5 months. So I sat up real straight and said, you are supposed to chant 16 rounds a day, Srila Prabhupada, but I chant 20. Srila Prabhupada just turned away from me and said, that's all right. It was like saying, don't get puffed up. Then he turned to me and said, here are your beads. Having Dev his beads, Prabhupada said, your name is Amarendra. This means that the best of the immortals. He named Andrini as Gayatri Das and Sam as Suvrata. When Suvrata stood and Prabhupada noticed he was not wearing neck beads, he withheld the chanting beads and said, you have no neck beads. Where are your neck beads? Prabhupada turned to Bhagavad Das. You also have no neck beads. Bhagavad thought that Prabhupada was going to take his chanting beads back. So he hid them against his stomach. Then Prabhupada turned to senior devotees in room criticizing. What is the matter with you? He said sternly, you are leaders and you don't even know these things. Don't you know that you must put the neck beads in giving initiations? So we see that when Prabhupada started preaching, spreading Krishna conscious movement, sometimes disciples were not so well versed with Krishna consciousness. In one of the initiation ceremonies held by Prabhupada, sometimes we see that some devotees at that time they did not have tulsi beads. So with the rosewood beads, they made the beads, and before initiation they used to wear the chanting beads as neck beads. If I am not wrong, Hayagri Prabhu used to wear like that for some time, till the time he got initiated. So not very people were fully conversant with details. The senior devotees were frightened by Prabhupada's anger. And if you want to really understand what anger sometimes Prabhupada had, you should ask Giriraj Maharaj. I was fortunate to hear from Giriraj Maharaj directly in Juhu how Prabhupada was angry when the Juhu land deal was cancelled. People, Prabhupada disciples compared almost that to Narsinghdev's anger. He was so furious. In one moment, Prabhupada could manifest so much of anger that the disciple would fear, ki I'm like gone, finished. Yes, Prabhupada said, you cannot do the fire yajna without neck beads. Sorry, we are sorry, Prabhupada, someone said. Tomorrow for the fire yajna, they will have neck beads. Yes, Prabhupada said, you cannot do fire yajna without neck beads. They must have neck beads. Although it was midnight, Prabhupada asked if the devotees had any questions. You can imagine the patience of Prabhupada. From morning, he took a flight, 2-3 classes, lectures, and then now giving initiations. And then he's asking if anybody has questions. Bhagavad Das raised his hand. How is it that we are on transcendental platform, but sometimes affected by the modes of nature? Typical general question people have. It is just like you are on a boat, Prabhupada replied. If you are on a boat, then I cannot say you and you are not on the boat. It is not. So you are on the transcendental boat. Therefore, you are on the transcendental platform. You cannot say that you are not. But the waves are coming and they are rocking the boat. Just like when we take a small boat and try to do a little bit boating in the ocean, the waves of ocean come and the boat also rocks a little bit. But the person in the boat does not go sink down. Still he is on the boat. So the waves of the material nature are coming, he continued, and they are rocking the boat. But when you become an expert boatman, then even in the greatest storm, you can stay steady and steer the boat and it will not rock. Well, how does one become expert boatman? Bhagavata asked. You become expert, Prabhupada replied, by becoming enthusiastic, sincere, confident, determined and patient. Seeing Bhagavat's anxious face, Prabhupada added, and you must be patient. Everything will come to you in due course. Sitting informally on the bed in his abbreviated dhoti, Prabhupada had answered Bhagavat's question in such a way as to fully satisfy all the devotees. The devotees were already satisfied just to be with Prabhupada. But by his answers to their questions, not only they but all the devotees could take encouragement and be satisfied. They would tell other devotees what he had said, and everyone would cherish these instructions of Srila Prabhupada. Amrendra also had a question. Amrendra was intense and impassioned, and so was his inquiry. Before becoming a devotee, he had a leader of campus radicals. Now he wanted to bring that same intensity to bear in spreading Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada, Amrendra asked, how can we make them to take Krishna consciousness? What can we say when we go to preach to people? What can we say that will make them to take it? His voice was heavy and forceful and demanding action. You simply ask them to please chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada replied, whether they take or not, that is their business. This is between them and Krishna, but you have done your business. You have done your duty for Krishna by simply asking, please chant Hare Krishna. So when we go out and preach also, whether we distribute books, whether we distribute prasadam, whatever we do, in the exchange of gesture, we say Hare Krishna. And inevitably, the other person who is receiving Krishna's mercy, they also say Hare Krishna. So simple process of preaching that we tell them to chant Hare Krishna. How do we take our minds away from Maya and bring them to Krishna? Radha Vallabha asked. You must drag the mind. Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita also to Arjuna, whenever your mind gets distracted, just bring it back. You must drag the mind, Prabhupada said. You must drag the mind back to the sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And again he repeated, you must drag the mind back to the sound vibration. All right. Prabhupada looked around, you must be satisfied now. So this is a process which is on living with us also. Whenever we chant Hare Krishna, sometimes when we shift from one round to another round, the mind comes back because there is a small kind of a pause. But while we are chanting continuously or in our beats, sometimes mind takes off to various 10 different things. What is happening in office, what is happening in family, what is happening about money, so many different things. But whenever we recognize that our mind is off chanting, even while chanting, we just have to bring it back. We should say, just cut it off. Just chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The devotees responded, yes, Srila Prabhupada, thank you very much. Then they all left. It had been the greatest day and night for their lives. They all agreed and they would never forget it. So even one simple interaction with Srila Prabhupada personally would make a person remember his lifelong that interaction with Prabhupada. While Prabhupada rode to Jacksonville airport in a car with a few disciples, the other devotees followed in their van, bringing the Vyasasan from the temple for Prabhupada to use it at the airport. So imagine, Prabhupada's life was like that. You are traveling, and the Vyasasan is also traveling, and you reach the airport. Right? Generally, you have to reach the airport like 45 minutes, 1 hour before, right? So that you complete your check-in process. So why to waste that 45 minutes? Give class there also. So that was Prabhupada's life. Srila Prabhupada closed his eyes and rested as he rode, and the devotees in the back seat of the car ate the remnants of his prasadam. Hridayananda, it was my idea to bring Prabhupada's Vyasasan to the airport. I was thinking, how can my spiritual master sit in the same seats that karmis sit on? It just seemed impossible. How could Prabhupada put his lotus body, how could he sit on the same seat as the karmis? I was very agitated by that. Amarendra had built the Vyasasan and he used to build everything like a tank. The Vyasasan must have been weighed several hundred pounds. It took 4 or 5 devotees to carry it. So Prabhupada arrived first and the Vyasasan wasn't there. By the time he got to the boarding gate and the Vyasasan still wasn't there. I was in anxiety because I didn't wanted him to sit on a regular seat. I thought it would be a great offense on my part. Then as I looked down long airport corridor, I saw 6 brahmacharis, half of them without their shoes on, lugging Prabhupada's Vyasasan down the corridor. It was an absurd scene. Prabhupada just stood there looking in disbelief and disgust, and finally several sweating, groaning brahmacharis came and dropped the Vyasasan down in front of Prabhupada. Prabhupada just looked at it with disdain, walked past it and sat down on an ordinary seat. While most of the devotees sat at the Prabhupada's feet chanting the Guru Ashtaka prayers to the spiritual master, Hridayananda was preaching to the people who were standing and watching the spectacle. He had some of Prabhupada's books and he was trying to distribute them. So Prabhupada gave more attention to this preaching than to the devotees seated at his feet. So in 70s, the whole movement was fully centered around Prabhupada. Wherever Prabhupada would go and start his preaching activities, the Guru Ashtakam used to start there because not many deities were installed. So when we sing in the morning, Samsara Dava Nalalida Loka, we sing in front of the deities. During those times, when Prabhupada was there, It was wherever Prabhupada they could see or disciples could meet first, they used to start Samsara Dava. We remember even Giriraj Maharaj and other Prabhupada disciples speaking about this at the times of Juhu, when Prabhupada came and he used to live in some quarters. The initial days of Juhu, the Mangalarti used to happen in Prabhupada's room, wherever he used to stay. They used to get up and then the Samsara Dava there. So indeed, this way Prabhupada gave a huge momentum to Iskcon, and we see now Iskcon with such a huge presence in the world. So this was one short episode of Prabhupada's lives from one day, how much he was pushing this Krishna consciousness movement. So we will stop here and we'll continue in our next Ekadashi wherever we have left. So thank you all very much for giving this opportunity. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada Lilamritam ki, Hare Krishna.